Hey guys, welcome to my channel. My name is ReadingBear and I hope you are ready for some more stories. And today, we will take a look at some new Just No HOA content. If you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comment. And now, let's dive right into the stories.
First one is titled, Shitty Neighbors Get What's Coming. The neighbor next door is an a-hole. We used to get along till he threatened my dad. It all started when he stole my sign for my home business that I had a right to put up in my lawn according to HOA. I didn't know it was him at first, but my dad saw it in their garage a few days later. He went over to ask him for it back instead of just sneaking into his garage to get it back, what I would do. A few seconds later I see my dad, a tiny, 64-years-old man with a heart condition running for his life with this buff, 30-years-old 6'1" guy chasing him telling him to get out of his property. I was livid. I get in front of my dad protectively as his friend runs after him and tackles him into the ground. Apparently the guy was drunk, like enough to want to beat up a 64-years-old man because he knocked on his door in the middle of the day. I ended up rushing my dad into the house and called the police. They were useless, didn't even do anything, but I was still livid and wanted my revenge. So for the last few months I have been inconveniencing him as much as I can, just to piss him off. This is a few of the things I have done. Usually we wait till morning or night to run our sprinklers. We were kind enough to water their grass as well as our own on our shared side and also mow the grass on our shared side. I have started to run the sprinklers every time he has his garage open so his stuff gets wet. I also make sure that I mow the lawn afterwards so that way all the excess grass gets stuck to his truck or on his side of the pavement. Our address is very similar. Usually you switch 2 numbers and that's our address. There have been times where I would get his mail and immediately put it in the outgoing box, now I don't. I keep them until weeks later and put them in the outgoing mailbox and sometimes I just forget. This resulted in him being late on a few payments. I know because I also received a final bill for a bill I knew I forgot to give them. We have a strict rule about leaving a car in front of the street for more than 2 days. So after 2 days I call HOA and he gets a warning which later escalates to a ticket which only increases. This resulted in him being ticketed a few times. I know because I saw the sign posted on his car. We also have strict noise pollution laws in our subdivision, which they constantly break every weekend. Usually I let it slide because hey it's Saturday, but not anymore. I complain every time and usually the cops show up and shut it down or they tell them to quiet down. They also tend to park right in front of my house blocking us in, which I didn't care about because usually I had nothing to do on Saturdays but not anymore. Now if someone is blocking us in and I know it's one of their friends, I call the non-emergency line and since my neighbor is a cop, they send him over to get them to move their cars. If it's their car I call the tow company and they once had to pay to get their car unhinged. They never did that again. Man, they were really upset when I called the police on them, but even the police said I should just let them handle it since the last time we tried to handle it ourselves we were chased out and threatened. Next one is titled, HOA Threatens Man's Pregnant Wife. This was last year. I just sold my home in my HOA. About 5 years ago I bought a 1,500 square feet townhome condo in an up-and-coming town. Right in the downtown area. This is a valuable property with home prices having increased 35% since I purchased. This was a wonderful area in walking distance of everything I loved as a single bachelor. When I moved in all my neighbors were wonderful. We all got along great except for one person. She belonged to the HOA board but was moving on because you can only serve 8 years. We'll call her Gimpy J. Gimpy J is a 65-plus-year-old widow whose husband died unexpectedly from a heart attack. She doesn't have much to do. She met a man online and moved on and I was happy for her. Talking to my passive neighbors I hear bits and pieces of why things are at the HOA because of Gimpy J and another woman who had to move because of age. On the board the two of them bully residents. They change the landscaping from mulch to pine needles, they stop upkeep on the pool deck because they hate kids. They reported one house for anything and everything because their kids were too loud. She bullied a woman with MS because Gimpy J was feeding feral cats and attracting raccoons and possums near our homes and animal control was called. Residents did not like her. I got married and wife has been living with me for 2 years now, at this point. We are very happy. During this time Gimpy J began spending more and more time with her new boyfriend. He lives about an hour away from our house in the country. She would initially spend the weekend, then a week there, until she began living there all the time with very little time spent here. Maybe 15 minutes to 2 hours a month would be at our complex. Now at our complex there is only one rule on parking. Each resident is entitled to 2 spots close to their building, but not necessarily in front of your unit, and there is no limit to parking spots you may occupy. Close to it is the key word. We have new folks on the board who are all under 40 years of age and the place is starting to get spruced up. We have some friends over regularly and they park in front of our unit. Gimpy J had 2 hip replacements done and we had not seen her in about 7 months. In our little area of the complex consists of 8 townhomes that face each other, 4 on one side 4 on the other. There are 8 spots for 3 homes and a handicapped spot for one of our neighbors. Gimpy J started coming back around in January for longer periods, a day on the weekend to go out downtown or to visit friends. She started complaining that we were in her spots. Again, there are no assigned spots. We were willing to move our friends' vehicles for her to another empty spot, that is until she started occupying 2 spots at a time with her vehicle. This behavior continued as she would come in taking 2 spots any time she was here. The rules in the master deed says no vehicle can take more than 1 spot without written permission from the board of directors or property management group and cannot continue for more than 2 days with permission. This was to account for residents moving in and out. Suddenly that spring my wife had a medical issue and was hospitalized for 4 days and on disability for 8 weeks. My mom was the only family member on both sides that had the capability of coming down to where we lived to help us out. She drove down and we needed to occupy 3 spots. I promptly let our property management company know and the board of directors know what was happening, providing them with my mom's make, model, and plate number and that she would be here 6 to 8 weeks, just in case anyone had an issue. Gimpy J's first time home in 6 weeks, we had a car in front of her house but she had room for her vehicle. She marched over and banged, and I mean it was loud, on the door demanding we move the car, and tried to open my front door and walk in my home. Yes, she tried to enter my home. It shook my dog who peed herself, it was that loud, who in turn growled and chased her out. I promptly told her there was no assigned parking and the rule is 1 car 1 spot. We would move a car out of respect one last time and saw she occupied 2 spots with it, per usual. The next time it happened, 2 weeks later, we refused to move our vehicle. We also began taking pictures for our records and communicating with our HOA of Gimpy J's erratic behavior. She continued to arrive, bang on our door, and scream at us for having a car parked in her spot. One time banging on the door, she dented the frame with her keys. A few additional times when we were not home she would come in and park occupying 2 spots. I would take more pictures, for my records in case something happened because of her erratic behavior. Finally it happened. About this time last year, I was at the gym and I get a call from my mom and my wife, frantic that someone is going to tow my wife's car. I drive home as fast as I can and it's Gimpy J's boyfriend's son and his girlfriend, whom we have never met. This jackass, who doesn't live here and has no business here, is screaming at us and insulting my pregnant wife and mother. My mother-in-law pays $XXX a month for these spots. You suckers are breaking the rules. I'm going to tow her SUV. All while drinking beer. Now we know he can't do anything except scream and try to intimidate us outside. He calls his mother-in-law, who is not married to his father, about the situation. Gimpy J drives an hour to our complex. When she gets here she parks her car behind all 3 of ours and gets out blocking us in, and I had enough. I quickly snapped some pictures. I called the police. I will not feel unsafe or be harassed in my neighborhood by people who do not live there, or are barely there. Gimpy J realizes I called the police and moves her car. I print out all my documentation, pictures, and communication from the HOA. I shower quickly because I'm disgusting from the gym and throw on a nice polo shirt and shorts. Pregnant wife sits in her rocking chair and my mother sits calmly at the kitchen table. The police arrive and we can see them hollering, waving arms widely, and screaming. The police come to the door and we kindly open up. Gimpy J tries to walk in before I block her and ask her to leave my property and invite the police officers inside. We apologized that we even have to call them over something so petty, but our neighbor is acting crazy and her behavior has been escalating. We explain what is happening, show them communication from the HOA, show them pictures. The officer quickly had enough of these white trash pieces of crap. He imposes a no trespass order on my porch and will not let her near my property. If she steps foot on our walkway, she is in violation of the order and she will be arrested. We watch him go back out and explain calmly to her, and she starts screaming along with her boyfriend's kid and his girlfriend. This goes on for a while and the officer calls for backup and a second car arrives promptly. Gimpy J promptly declares it's her property too. She pays her fees and that he can't do that because everything is community property outside of a home. She goes and marches up to my stoop and he arrests her. Charges her with disorderly conduct and harassment. The police then tell Gimpy J's boyfriend's son to go home. He gets in his truck with his white trash girlfriend and they drive off. As soon as he hits the road outside of our complex, the second police officer pulls him over, for DUI. That's right, the drunken guy screaming at my wife and mother had been drinking the entire time and was loaded. Police couldn't do anything in the complex, but could when he hit the main road. Both of them were hauled off the jail and we stopped hearing from them about parking. 2 days later, Gimpy J and her boyfriend show up to the complex and they park her boyfriend's car in our lot and leave it parked in one spot to ensure it's hers. Well, they drive off and we don't hear from them in a week and no one is home. Since Gimpy J's boyfriend does not live here and his car is abandoned, I called the HOA to report it. They came and towed his SUV. Gimpy J put her house on the market 8 weeks later. Fuck HOAs. Last one is titled, "Here's the story of how my parents' HOA tried to use a 40-year-old rule to stop them from repairing hurricane damage and got the shaft for their trouble." A few years back, as you all may remember, Florida got pretty beaten up by a couple of hurricanes. My folks lived down there, and while none of the damage that they sustained was life-alteringly horrible or home-destroying, homeowners insurance kicked in and they had some water damage through the roof. They also needed a new one because of all of the shingles that had come off, debris that had punctured it. My folks looked through roofing options and determined that a metal roof would be a great option to reduce damage, maintenance on their home. Plus, it would serve as a more energy-efficient option with passive solar collection and fewer thermal losses in the summer, winter. It's more expensive, but my dad was basically personal finance incarnate while I was growing up. He's in his 60s and has finally concluded that he has suck you money so long as that community is concerned, so the roof was a good investment. It looked like a win-win-win with that roof. Then they reviewed the HOA and saw that, as of 1989, metal roofs are prohibited in the neighborhood, subject to fines and mandatory removal. Reviewing the bylaw further showed that it was clearly referring to older, crappier tin roofs, not a proper metal one like today's market provides, which looks great and has all of those other benefits. My folks wanted to play by the rules, though, and called up the HOA to explain the situation. HOA was friendly and said that they would be looking into that bylaw, and that my folks weren't the only ones who requested that they be allowed to have a metal roof. My parents couldn't get a roofing contractor in for a few months anyway. Too much demand since everyone else's roof got wrecked. So they waited a few weeks and got nothing new out of the HOA. Tried again a few weeks later. Nothing. After 2 months of this, they said suck it and started construction on the metal roof. Popular opinion in the neighborhood was on their side, and the roof was covered with a tarp that wouldn't last forever. The new roof got installed over the course of a few days, and then we found out the HOA's shittiness. The neighborhood has a nice brick sign out front that says, "Welcome to neighborhood name." It's very classy, very nice, and was very damaged in a hurricane. The HOA was strapped for money due to other repairs, dues, and some prick had the bright idea to impose as many fines as they could on the neighborhood to pay for these repairs, starting with my folks. They served my folks with a letter claiming that they were in violation of the HOA, and demanded a $25,000 fine and that they remove it. Which is, of course, absurd. My poor mother is very much a play-by-the-rules sort, and she was worried sick. Dad's ex-Navy and a contract negotiator. He essentially checked his 60-year-old knuckles and said, "Oh, you little shits wanna play, do you?" So they set about researching and making some calls. Poor mom kept waking up at 1 a.m. unable to sleep, and I felt terrible for her as she went through this. But then, they had a breakthrough. A few weeks after being served, I'm fuzzy on the timeline since I don't live in Florida. It may have been less. There was essentially a burn them at the stake meeting of the HOA where my parents could defend themselves for an absurdly short amount of time and the HOA could rip into them for daring to defy their wrath. So my mom, because she's more social, has a better temper than dad, comes up to speak, and lets the HOA know that they can't do this. HOA smirks and says that they sure can, they have a 40-year-old statute saying that they can. Mom says, "You do. But I have state law on my side, which supersedes your statute." Turns out, there's a law in Florida stating that an HOA, or really, any regulation, cannot be used to prevent an eco-friendly improvement from taking place on anyone's private property. And wouldn't you know it, the passive solar of the metal roof counts as an eco-friendly improvement. Turns out, the roofing contractors have dealt with similar stuff before. When Dad mentioned what was going on to them, the contracting officer pulled out a few letters of accreditation and a few past cases where the court had determined that their product was eco-friendly and forced the HOA to pay all legal fees. My mom produced all of this for the shitty HOA, who had to admit that this was in fact ironclad. Strapped for money as they were, they couldn't afford to pay a lawyer. HOA head growls, "Is that all?" Mom turns up the sweetness to 11. "No. I see in the bylaws that we can vote to impeach board members at any HOA meeting and to elect their replacements. I move to impeach all of you. I nominate my husband," and she rattles off a list of names. HOA is stunned. While Dad looked into the legal, Mom looked into the new neighborhood. Popular opinion was on their side, and the hearing was public for the neighborhood. Mom convinced a majority of the homeowners to attend and remove the board for their crappy policy. With that, my parents are now on the all-new board, and Dad is putting his contract negotiation skills, own craftsmanship skills to work repairing the front entrance. And metal roofs are now allowed by the all-new HOA. Thanks for listening.